life in a completely different culture than he was used to. The cultural association helped him get started on his new life. My Uncle George would bring my father with him to the annual Summer Cultural Groups Festival, and later, he would bring me. It was incredible to see so many people of all ages laughing and celebrating with food and song and dance. It brought back the best feelings of home and gave my father the opportunity to pass his culture, language, and values on to me. My father and Uncle George were very close, so when George died last year, my father wanted to honor his wishes to be buried with a traditional ceremony back at his birthplace. My father told me that because Uncle George had cultural group life insurance, he was able to afford to bring George home and have the traditional burial George wanted. Though my father had been able to honor my Uncle George's wishes, it got me thinking about my own family. One day, I'd have to make the same arrangements for my own parents, and my wife's parents as well. Of course, we would want to bring them home and honor their wishes, but it would be a financial hardship for our family. There were a lot of things to think about, even though I really didn't want to think about them at all. When my father told me about cultural group life insurance, he told me it's intended to help families when they need it the most. It's not tied to an employer, so no matter where my career takes me, I'll always have coverage. The more people who participate and the younger they are, the more it helps keep the insurance premiums down for the entire association. Because my parents have cultural group term life insurance, there will be money available to help me provide the kind of service I want to give my parents. And by joining, I can put my mind at ease and continue to celebrate our traditions into the future. With cultural group life insurance, I can worry less and spend more of my time celebrating with the people who matter most to me.
Hot mix mixing.
Welcome to another Saturday afternoon with Ellie Naimal at Temper Africa TV. Today we're going to give you guys really quick updates on what is going on with the American system, or politic, I should say it. And after that, we're going to have a very special guest who's going to help us lay out some information on the immigration process and what is going on. Because I know a lot of my friends, families, and also viewers have asked based on immigration. So first, to give you guys a little update, the recent Congress we had, Marjorie Taylor Greene. So as far as the voting goes and everything on what's going on her end, the voting is not complete, so they're still processing on that. And I know with her being a congresswoman and being a part of the committee, she has been targeted a lot based on her past and all of the threats and the stuff that she has made on social media before she started running as a congresswoman. So a lot of those are starting to backslash on her as a QAnon. And most of what we know as QAnon is basically conspiracies or things that are a little bit beyond belief. So when you speak about things that are probably happening behind closed doors and you never have an evidence to see it, or it's almost unrealistic to know what they are, those are some of the QAnon aspects. Even I myself starting to realize starting to learn what QAnon really is. So she's basically being held accountable for her past with all the QAnon and the leading on with the QAnon. So however that's turned out, we won't find out until the next few days, until after they made their final vote on it. Now, some of the other updates with the stimulus check. So Biden came on and spoke about it. I believe it was a few days ago. Definitely not more than 3 days ago. So he gave us an update about it, what is going on. The $1.9 trillion package is still going to be sent out as a relief package to all business owners and those who own mortgages. also the economic system like food stamp and cash assistance, things that help the lower class people, and also sending out the money to the regular American people. So he's basically set on $1,400. I know some has been arguing that he was going to send out $2,000. And my whole thought was the $1,400 was the remaining of the $600 that we got earlier. And that $1,400 was going to be the rest of the money that goes to the American people. So that is where his mind is completely set on, and we don't have an exact date. He didn't give an exact date when that will be, but it could be anytime towards the end of the month and also early next month as well. So we'll stay tuned to that and stay updated to that. Now going on, that's pretty much all the update I can really give you guys as far as the news. There's just been a lot of fight going on in the GOP department. The Congress are now separated more than ever, still trying to make an agreement with all the rules and regulations and things like that. And we decided we're going to have a guest today and specifically talk about immigration. Because immigration right now is something that is lighting up a lot of people's knowledge to ask questions. Okay. So with Biden administration, we didn't really hear a lot about his policies during the campaign and all those ongoing times. But now that he's in the office, people want to know what are his plans with the immigration. And we have a lawyer who works in the immigration field at the law firm that will explain that to us today. So that will answer some of your guys' questions and also give you a relief on what's going on with the immigration. Even I myself don't even know what's going on with the immigration right now, with the travel ban and all the other et cetera that are just extra right now. And hearing all of this will give us a relief on that. So with our guest today, her name is Uche. I can't pronounce her last name correctly, and I don't want to butcher it live right now, but she will give us a little bit more information on who she is once we bring her on here. And she is an immigrant from Nigeria. So she's a very hardworking woman who has been working in the system here in the United States as well as in Nigeria. And she has earned a couple of her degrees, PhD and bachelor from a couple of different universities. And she, she'll give us a little biography of who she is. But those are just some of the information I want to let you guys know so you know who is coming on. And she is a lawyer who is working in the immigration system. So let's introduce our guest, bring her on, Uche. Hi, Uche, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This is such an honor.
Yes, it's my pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you. So let's go ahead and start. Introduce yourself to our audience so they have a little bit more better, accurate bio from you.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce myself. The full name is actually Uche, and I'm going to tell you what it means. It means God's will. So it's Uche. The last name is Nwaneri. The N is silent. And I am originally from Nigeria. So I'm an attorney in Nigeria and also an attorney here in the United States. And I practice comprehensive immigration law.
Amazing. You're actually working in both countries. You don't hear that a lot. You really don't. You're either working over there or here, especially when it comes to law.
Exactly.
So that's very unique. So how long have you been working in the law firm, and what can we hear today, or what can our people expect from you today?
Well, I've been an attorney in the United States since 2003, and actually I got my law degree, my bar license in Minnesota. So I used to be in Minnesota and recently relocated to Houston, Texas. So I'm now in Houston, Texas for about 5 years. So the greater part of my life I have spent in Minnesota, and I have been practicing 2010 off and on, but completely here in Texas, I am into immigration. When I was in Minnesota, I practiced other areas of law, but here in Texas, I'm exclusively in immigration.
Wow. So you left Minnesota, you decided to go serve Texas. That's okay. You know, and Texas is a beautiful place, so it's definitely a wonderful place. Maybe the rest of us will follow you when we get tired of the snow or the cold at some point. So one of the main questions that I remember, you know, this is one of the, you know, youth that were asking in Africa. They're currently living in Africa, and they wanted to understand what is the immigration status here in the United States, which is kind of funny in a way too, because you know, they're looking at the immigration more here in the United States as well. So, because, you know, a lot of people, their hope is to come into the United States, whether it is to visit or to, you know, observe or to come and to live and stay or anything like that. So the main common one that I know very well, of course, is the marriage for immigration. That's one of the quickest way for people to bring their spouse here in the United States. But as far as someone in Africa trying to pursue their way to come into the United States, what are the rules and regulations with there now? Because I know they have the refugee thing. So if you're in a refugee and there's a processing time that is open, you can, you know, submit your application, tell your story, go through the process, and may have the opportunity to come into the United States. Has any of that changed now with the new administration?
Okay. So did you say something about refugees?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes. And well, thank you for that question. When it comes to refugees, I guess we're just talking about people who are being persecuted in their countries. And I would say America has been so gracious to welcome those kind of people. So as far as refugees, this says, yes, there is a screening process. And with the past administration, it was not as favorable to welcoming refugees. So that the number of refugees for each year, there is a cap of individuals who can come in as refugees. That was really slashed with the previous administration. I mean, it went as low as 15,000. That has always been that's been the lowest we've seen in history. But with the new administration has welcomed, knowing that this is a priority and knowing that it's of concern to the American community. So they are planning to increase that number. We've had numbers float around. We've had 125,000. So that's welcoming because this administration is all on it. They would welcome asylees and refugees, knowing that there's a lot of persecution in their countries. And they're working so tirelessly to revamp the entire system because there's a lot of reform that's required when it comes to immigration in the United States.
Okay, so when you gave certain numbers there, are those numbers representing the amount of people that can come into the United States or that are eligible to come into the United States a year? And is that the total number for the whole country of the United States from anywhere around the world?
Okay, for coming into, no, that number was just for refugees.
Okay.
So for coming into the United States, there are options of coming into the United States. So for someone who is not in the United States, who is interested in coming into the United States, the first question to ask is, what do you want to come to the United States to do?
Right.
So if you want to come in for a temporary visit, there's some people who are not interested in living in the United States. Mm-hmm. So they will be coming in maybe for a temporary visa, and that could be a visitor's visa. That should be obtained from their embassy. Okay. And you can always apply at any time. I mean, different embassies have different rules. So it's a discretionary visa, and you need to explain to them that you have ties in your home country and you plan to come back. So you can come here on a tourist visa to visit, to shop, to visit family. There are different reasons you can come in for a temporary visa. But that's for you to stay and go back at the end of your visit. But then there's some people who are now saying, okay, no, I don't only want to visit, I now want to live in the United States. So in this block of people, you'll be talking now about immigrant visas, and there are different categories of immigrant visas. For anybody wanting to come to the United States, I would encourage that person to find out if you belong to one of the diversity visa lottery countries. That may be one of the easiest ways to come in. If you participate in the lottery and you're selected, then you can come in with your family.
That was what I was looking for. Okay, now it totally makes sense. So with the temporary visa, what are their requirements? Do they need a sponsor in order for them to get that temporary visa, or they have to be stable enough in their own country in order to get, like, who are the ones that are eligible?
Okay, for a temporary visa, you'd want to find out if you belong to a visa waiver country. There are lots of countries that belong to that, somewhere like the UK, so many countries. With that, you don't need a visa to come in. You can come in for 90 days and then you leave. So if you don't belong to the visa waiver country, the way to apply for a non-immigrant visa is it's an online application. So you go online and apply, and on the online application, it's a Department of State website. You go in, the form is a form DS-160. So with that, you'll need to put in your information, and then it's going to ask you if you've ever applied for a visa, and what are you coming to do? Who are you going to stay with? Do you have relatives here? So after applying and it's submitted at the embassy, you will now be scheduled for an interview. And at the interview, you're supposed to go in with supporting documents. And really what they're looking out for, the interviewing officer, the consular officer, what they're looking out for is for you to show them proof that you're going in for the purpose you're applying for. And then at the end of the visit, you're coming back to your country. So then you're going to establish ties. So if you're working, you show them you're working. If you have a bank account, yes, you show them, yes, you're very comfortable in your country. If you have family or house, you put in all those supporting documents to let them know that, yes, there's no way for you to leave your country and stay back in the United States because you have ties to your country. So that's essentially what you need. You need to show them proof that you'll be able to come back at the end of your visit.
Okay. Thank you for that information there. Now, when it comes to family, is there any changes in how you can apply visas for like siblings or family in general, either to have them come to the United States or to become an immigrant?
Yes, there is what you call the immigrant visas, and in that immigrant visa, you have different categories. So for the closer you are to a family, so if you are an applicant and then you are either a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident, you can apply for your family. You can apply for your spouse if you're a U.S. citizen. You can apply for your children under 21 years. And those will fall into what you call the immediate relatives. These people are immediate relatives because they don't have to wait for a visa number. So as soon as the application is processed, they're invited to an interview and they can come in sooner. Then you have permanent residents, lawful permanent residents, who can also apply for their spouse and can also apply for their children under 21. These people will now fall into the preference categories. Preference categories are people who have to wait for a visa number. They have to wait for their turn. They wait for their turn, and then when it gets to their turn, they can now go and they can now go to the interview. So people like that, you have lawful permanent residents, you have U.S. citizens who have children who are older than 21. You have U.S. citizens who have siblings So all these people can apply as long as you're related to that U.S. citizen and lawful permanent resident. But the only difference is you have to know, depending on the category you're applying in, you have to know whether you're supposed to wait for a visa number or it's something that you don't require a visa number. So it's only the immediate relatives that at this time are not required to wait for a visa number. And with the Biden administration, one of the changes they are planning to make is to enhance or to upgrade the lawful permanent residents to become immediate relatives. Mm-hmm. So that way lawful permanent residents can apply without really waiting for a visa number. So we're waiting for those changes.
Okay. So now I'm just going to go a little bit more into the American side of immigration. I know there has been a lot of fear to some of the American people with the immigration changing. So like when you mentioned earlier, someone who is coming in for a visit can apply for a visa and enter into the United States for a short temporary time and would have to go back into their country. Now this has been argued a lot, and with some of the people that are fearing about the immigration process is that when there are people that are breaking to go back to their countries and they are choosing to stay here, what happens to those people? Is there anything that is in process for a change, or will they eventually become American citizen, or are they gonna at some point realize that their visa expired and will have to deport them?
Okay, so these are for people who have come in here legally with a visa and their visa is expired, right?
Right.
Okay. So for this kind of people, what it allows them to do, as long as you come in with a visa, you're allowed to adjust your status. So you can come in with a visa, and even when your visa expires. So another confusion people see is when they come in with a visa at the port of entry at the airport, you're usually stamped. Your passport is stamped, and there you have another date. So people confuse that with the actual date on their visa, on their passport or their visa, and saying, "Oh, I don't have enough time to stay." No, when you come into the country and you see that stamp, that is the date you should be looking at. That is how long you should stay in the country for. So when that expires, what you do is you either, before it expires, if you plan on staying back, you plan on applying for an extension of your visa. And then if you plan to change your status, you can change, assuming, I'm going to give you an instance. You can come in as a visitor, and then suddenly you go in and say, "You know what, I think I want to study further. I want to now become a student." So you're now able to apply for a student visa. Or for some reason, you find somebody else who you get into a relationship with, you're able to adjust your status. So there are different categories where you can adjust your status. Now, the good part of it is, so long as you entered with a visa, you're able to adjust your status. So you are better off than someone who did not enter the country without a visa. What happens with those people are they can adjust their status, they can get their green card, but they have to step out of the country to apply for their visa in their home country.
They would have to step out first and then go apply and then be able to come back.
So before you go out, before you step out, it's always better for you. It's something it's called a waiver. You have to apply for a waiver. And before you step out, you want to make sure that that waiver is approved. If it is not approved, then don't step out, because if you step out, you may not be allowed back in. So it's always best to ask an attorney before you step out, because you might not be allowed in.
To get back
and
in,
then even if you have a visa and you've applied for an adjustment of status and you need to step out, don't just step out, because anytime you step out, always know that you're going to be subjected to an inspection. And during that inspection, you may or may not be allowed to enter back into the country.
Yeah. And so with that extension, they can apply before the visa expires to see if they're eligible for it to extend it?
That's correct.
Okay.
They have to apply
Perfect.
before their I-94 expires.
Okay. Now, with DACA, so I have a question about DACA.
Sure.
So DACA are the children who are either, came into the United States and they grew up here and they don't have documents in order to get their citizenship. What is Biden's plan with DACA? Because I know on the note, I think if I read it wrong, it says that his plan they're going to stay the same as far as DACA. And I know DACA, I don't remember if it's every year or every 2 years, they have to reapply or something to in order to keep their stay in the United States. Is that still the same, or is there any new changes to that, or can they become citizens? Do they get green cards? What happens with DACA?
Okay, with DACA, there's a glimmer of hope, I would say. The previous administration tried not to advance the cause of the DACA applicants. So DACA, let me give you a brief background about DACA. DACA was actually promulgated by the previous administration, of which the President Biden used to be a part of. It was originated by the Obama administration. So that was challenged, and it's still being challenged because it did not go through the Congress. It came in by an executive action. So with DACA, the previous administration tried to kill that and wanting them not to advance the path of citizenship or permanent residency. And the bills that were submitted unfortunately were killed in Congress. And former President Trump at the time did not want to advance this. So now this is a group that is so dear to everyone. I would say the administration as well as the Congress, and everyone is sympathetic to this group. So for now, what we have now with this new administration, and why I said that according to President Biden, that help is on the way. So on day one of his administration, he sent the legislation to Congress. And on top of the priority list is the DACA applicants, or people who are in DACA. So DACA now has been tabled before Congress. Actually, it was tabled sometime this week, by the two senators, Senator Lindsey Graham and Durbin, for them to now table that to discuss and approve DACA. So for the changes, DACA applicants can now apply for their work authorization. They can continue renewing work authorization. But beyond work authorization, the Biden administration has better plans or more long-lasting plans for them to obtain their citizenship and maybe get their green cards first and then the citizenship. So there's that hope that we're hoping that will come true. And as long as this legislation, which I'm hoping that there might not be a lot of challenges or pushback. So with that, they might be able to advance this cause further.
Okay, so Biden is pushing on making that a legislation. Is that part of his plan as well?
For what?
Is that part of his plan as well, to make it a legislation so it no longer becomes just an executive order?
Yes, for DACA, it's one of the priorities.
Okay.
And that's the group, the DACA, the TPS, and farm workers. Those are the ones who will be on the path of to citizenship by his administration. But remember, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security was only appointed this week, and his appointment was confirmed this week. So we're looking to see policies that will be put in place. But DACA is one group that I know legislation will be advanced as quickly as possible.
Okay. That's good information to know to a lot of our Spanish viewers out there. especially a lot of our Daca friends as well has been asking these questions.
Okay.
Now, one of the executive order we recently heard was putting a pause on the deportation for 100 days, and I didn't quite understand exactly what that means. So could you give us a little explanation on what does it mean?
Okay. So the Biden administration came in with a very robust and immigration reform, touching every aspect of immigration. And what he wanted to do was to reassess, to evaluate the status quo before promulgating promulgating new laws or policies. So there was a lot of he had asked as part of his legislation or executive order, he had an executive order to pause deportations. And these are for people who have gone through the court system and they have a final deportation order asking them to leave the country or face consequences. So a lot of people have not left, or some people are still in detention, and some people are in expedited removal status. So for him, he's saying for now, pause all deportations. Nobody should be deported. Let's reassess and evaluate the system. Unfortunately, with executive order, because it's not a legislation, that was challenged, and unfortunately by my state, that's Texas, the Attorney General of Texas.
Yeah, Texas are very challenging. I love Texas for that.
We don't know anything better. So
yeah,
the Attorney General of Texas, yes, initiated that, and I hear that the state of Arizona is also joining in that suit. So with the Attorney General of Texas, he has asked for an injunction, which was granted. An injunction was put a stop on that, and that was for 14 days. So now that has been extended to the 23rd of February. So after then, let's say if we'll now revert back to the 100 days, or what next? What are we going to expect from that? But that was challenged, and a stop has been put to it. So we'll see what happens after that, but that's really what it is.
So is that 100 days the process time that he needs in order to come with a final solution on deportation?
No, the 100 days is 100. The 100 days is saying don't deport anybody else. So ICE, the Department of Homeland Security, it's called Immigration Enforcement, the Immigration Enforcement Department. They are the ones who issue these deportation orders and who enforce, not issuing them. They are the ones, the judges, and issue the deportation. And I'll give you an example. Assuming you go for asylum and then you're denied, and then you're not appealing, then that judge's order becomes final. And you will also receive in the mail asking you might receive a letter telling you you need to depart the country. And then if you don't depart the country, you're going to be paying, sometimes they say $750 every day for each day you don't depart the country.
Oh, wow.
So this it's a deportation order. You have an order of deportation. So what it's saying is you need to leave the country. But of course, a lot of people don't leave. And then what this 100 days is saying is from the date he got into, the day he presented this legislation, it's please pause. That's ICE. Don't deport anybody else from maybe January 20th. Don't deport anybody else. Let's reevaluate what is going on, so long as you're in the country. But with this challenge from the Texas Attorney General, they will continue processing their deportation, and they're still allowed to deport until after the 23rd.
Wow. So hope for the best results there to see what are the updates going to be once they have finalized that, because it is pretty interesting. And it has been a really hot topic lately. A lot of people are just debating and kind of freaking out over this issue of the deportation.
Exactly.
And also, but I know some of the other things that has been argued a lot on both sides is the wall, not allowing illegal immigration to come into the United States or going through the immigration process. And that's still a lot of issue there of his own. And also Yeah, one last thing. I know we're kind of towards the end of our stream here. So with the African and the Muslim countries that are banned, did this mean that anyone from those countries now can apply to come into the United States if they are eligible?
So you're talking about the ban, the Muslim ban?
Yeah, because 6 countries
bans?
were
Yes.
banned. Yeah.
And actually, that's something I'd wanted the community to know, because what it is there are 2 bans, and they are saying if you're from the African countries, you cannot immigrate to the United States.
Oh.
But the process for immigrating to the United States is not just one-step process.
Mm-hmm.
If you're applying from outside the United States, you have a 3-step process. Mm-hmm. So it did not put a stop to the other processes. So out of those processes, for you to apply, you can still apply. Even with the ban, you can still apply. What it stops you from doing is when it's time for the interview, you have to wait till the ban has been lifted before you can be scheduled for an interview, because the embassies are not scheduling interviews because of that ban. But that does not stop you from applying for the immigrant visa application. You can apply. You can, because you have to apply, and then your application, when approved and all your documents are complete, it's now being sent to the National Visa Center. So you can still advance those other two steps. But when it gets to time for you to be scheduled for an interview, that is when this ban will affect it. And that is when you have to wait till the embassies are now allowed and the bans are lifted, and maybe the embassies are now allowed to issue visa appointments. Because as we speak now, my clients are now being scheduled for interviews. So for the country of Nigeria, they are being scheduled for interviews. Actually, one was scheduled for this month of February. So I think the embassies are now beginning to issue interview appointments. So I would say that the ban may be enforced in some embassies. So it's always good to check with your embassies to know when they have resumed visa operations.
Thank you so much. I think you pretty much answered all my questions. So I really appreciate you for taking the time to even, answer it as much as possible. But how could people reach out to you if they have any questions? Do you have like a website or anything that we could share in our content?
Okay, yes. And before I go, I also want to mention, I didn't mention fiancé, people who are not even married, people who are engaged to anybody who's outside.
Yeah.
There's a fiancé visa, you can also use that. So I don't want to forget that. You can always use that. So what it is you can contact me using, the website is premlaw.net, PREM law.net. And the phone number is 713-730-2900. Again, it's 713-730-2900. So feel free and contact me. It's always good to ask questions and for whatever guidance before you take any steps in immigration, so that you don't regret any consequence.
Thank you so much. I might be reaching out to you, so.
Okay.
I hope you do virtual or over the phone, because now that you're all the way in Texas.
That's really fine.
Yes.
Okay.
So I might be reaching out to you. All right. Uchena, right?
Yes. Okay.
Thank you so much. I look forward to talking to you more sometime in the near future when we have more updates on immigration. So
wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. Bye.
Bye. All right, so that was it.
Are we off?
We're off.
My whole life, my father told me stories about moving to the United States. He would tell me that his brother, my Uncle George, was already living here and let my father stay with him for a while. Through my Uncle George, my father was introduced to our cultural organization here in America, who helped him make connections, apply for college, find his first job, and adjust to life in a completely different culture than he was used to. The Cultural Association helped him get started on his new life. My Uncle George would bring my father with him to the annual Summer Cultural Groups Festival, and later, he would bring me. It was incredible to see so many people of all ages laughing and celebrating with food and song and dance. It brought back the best feelings of home. and gave my father the opportunity to pass his culture, language, and values on to me. My father and Uncle George were very close, so when George died last year, my father wanted to honor his wishes to be buried with a traditional ceremony back at his birthplace. My father told me that because Uncle George had cultural group life insurance, he was able to afford to bring George home and have the traditional burial George wanted. Though my father had been able to honor my Uncle George's wishes, it got me thinking about my own family. One day, I'd have to make the same arrangements for my own parents, and my wife's parents as well. Of course, we would want to bring them home and honor their wishes, but it would be a financial hardship for our family. There were a lot of things to think about, even though I really didn't want to think about them at all. When my father told me about cultural group life insurance, he told me it's intended to help families when they need it the most. It's not tied to an employer, so no matter where my career takes me, I'll always have coverage. The more people who participate and the younger they are, the more it helps keep the insurance premiums down for the entire association. Because my parents have cultural group term life insurance, there will be money available to help me provide the kind of service I want to give my parents. And by joining, I can put my mind at ease and continue to celebrate our traditions into the future. With cultural group life insurance, I can worry less and spend more of my time celebrating with the people who matter most to me.